Hello, my name is Pranav Kothari. I work at Educational Initiatives, where our vision is to see a world where every child is learning with understanding. We do this by making high-quality assessments and a personalized adaptive learning software called MindSpark. In EI Dialogues, we aim to bring conversations with education leaders from around the country. We try to understand what is it that ticks them, what's their theory of change, what are their thoughts on scale, what have they achieved, and what advice do they have for some of us who are new to the education sector. Today, I have the pleasure of inviting Ashok Kamath to our office. Welcome, Ashok.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ashok is the chairman of the Akshara Foundation. Akshara is designing solutions for pre-primary and primary schools in a way that is scalable and can be taken to multiple states. In today's conversation, I want to ask Ashok, after working for 15 years in this sector, if he were to design from scratch, what would he do differently? What are the differences between an intervention and a model? And especially if that model can be community-driven and be sustainable for the long term. After working for 24 years in one company, what made Ashok transition to this sector? Welcome, Ashok, and I look forward to our conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.
Ashok, can you describe Akshara as an organization? When it was started, what does it do?
Yeah, sure. Akshara was started in the year 2000 at the request of the state government of Karnataka. Right? At that time, the state reached out to industry in Bangalore and said we need some help. That time, I think the focus was on Bangalore. And in fact, the settler of the trust was the then Commissioner for Public Instruction. So, I think industry kind of, acted upon it and set up Akshara. And initially we were focusing on preschool in the city of Bangalore. And then we started to build on the linkage to primary school, then went into primary school. And now we're focusing, we've become better and better at doing things. So 2006-07, we had a reading program for all schools in Bangalore, in Kannada and in Urdu. So there were 1400 odd schools in Bangalore. So every school we covered. And then the following years, the state took that program statewide to all schools in the state. So that's happened. And then we brought in math, and we realized that math is really where the Achilles heel is. Okay, you'd be surprised at the number of people who have told me that 525 divided by 5 is 15. Right?
Because they take the 500 as 1 and the 25 as 5. And yeah.
So there's a lot of people, including teachers, who have said that to me. Right? The phobia for math, as you know, is very large. And yet, we are now in the 21st century where almost every job needs a certain level of analytical thinking. So how do you prepare generations now for the future?
But wouldn't like calculators and computers be able to tell you 525 divided by 5?
Well, it's not about, so that's not what math is, right? It's not about 525 divided by 5. It's about what is division, right? So it's understanding
the concept of division.
Concept of it and understanding it.
How to use it in real life.
And use it in real life. So I think we move therefore into math, but I would like to think that our contribution should be more than beyond math. It's a model. Can others, and we are happy to share the thinking with anyone. Akshara was and is probably one of the few organizations that's put every single piece of its learning in the Creative Commons. So our math know-how is available in 8 languages on our website. And in the last year or so, more than 3,000 people and organizations have downloaded our content for free.
Nice. And what's the motivation? Why put it up for free? Why not charge for it? Why not use that as a revenue stream for the organization to achieve sustainability?
Well, one is if you, we don't want to get into that monetization thing. I mean, the idea was to develop things and make it available so that the sense of urgency is addressed. So nobody is reinventing wheels, right? And again, math is the ideal vehicle, right? And it's available in 8 languages. So if we have had from all over, for example, all over the Hindi-speaking states, we have had people downloading our Hindi versions of the manual in the hundreds, right? And this goes from individual teachers to individual parents to organizations, and many well-known organizations at that. So we are very pleased about it. I mean, that people are learning. Our building blocks as an app is free, right? So we just saying, putting it out in the Creative Commons, can that give us the leap as a society for children to learn faster without people coming and reinventing it and testing it and iterating? Because we've gone through that process.
Right.
Why should others go through the same process, right? So,
Ashok, could you describe your personal journey and sort of what you did before and how did you enter this space?
okay. So I grew up in an era of shortages in this country. There was a shortage for everything. Food was rationed, right? Opportunities were also shortage, right? So, but I was fortunate. I studied at IIT-Bombay and got a good job. Well, you guys, today's generation will not consider it good because the pay was 600 rupees a month. But in those days it was, it was something. But then I worked hard and I came up quite rapidly. And somewhere around, the mid-40s, I figured that, I was a little secure. And
a little more than 600 rupees a month?
A little more than 600 rupees a month. And therefore, the question became why? And I attributed it to the education I got at 25 rupees a month. My education cost me 25 rupees as tuition and 12 rupees as hostel rent. And that's a debt of gratitude you have to repay, right? So 5 years at IIT was 370 into 5 is about 1850, right? Today you walk into a restaurant and you spend that kind of money. And I got 5 years of education. So, how do you give something like that back? And I figured if I can make children have a level playing field in some shape and form, and I chose to move into this. So after I finished IIT, I was working in the industry, worked for one company for 24 years. And then I said I'd make this move.
And the math worked out?
And the math worked out. So it's been good fun. I've always had a great time going to small schools in remote parts of the state, in different states now.
Are your friends jealous of you?
Everybody I meet say, I wish I could do what you did.
And what do you tell them?
And I say, you can do what I did. Right? Then they turn and say, but I don't have the kind of guts you have. I said, you do. You just have to exercise it.
So how many of your friends have you recruited into this mission?
Everybody is a friend, yeah? So, everybody is a friend. So, now, I mean, listen, for me it was different. I mean, it's not that I worked in industry, I cut my bones and I got to where I had to. And then I made the move. But I can't expect that of young people who are just starting life. So,
what about some people who are working in the corporate sector, who have some guts and have some intention of moving? What advice would you give them?
So, I always feel that, A is that you got to keep your eyes and ears open. Normally, we tend to come in, from the corporate world and think we know a lot more than the others, and unfortunately, we don't. It takes a while to, realize that. So that's, one thing. And of course, the humility should accompany that. Is like the smallest guy in the smallest place will teach you something that might be a small lesson, but it will eventually magnified to be a big lesson.
Ashok, after 15 years of working in the education transformation space, if you were to do things again from scratch, how would you do it differently?
I think there are two ways to do things, right? And it's a function of what you want to do, right? And the spectrum is wide enough that you could do a variety of things, right? So on one hand, you could start by saying, I want to build 5 top quality schools for the underprivileged, but top quality giving you, all 7 courses. But that will limit you to a small number of people. And you start wondering at that point, if you are impacting 7,000 kids, what does it mean when you have a total population of 150 million children? So that's a kind of a scare that you would get. At the other end of the scale is, other end of the spectrum, not to confuse the word scale. At the other end of the spectrum really is something that can impact lots and lots of children, but perhaps 1 or 2 courses. Right? So to me, I chose the latter one, or I will choose if I were to start again, I would choose the latter one, simply because of the size of the problem we have in India. It is essential, A, to have your sights on scale right from the beginning, and B, for you to be able to walk away from a geography where you are performing after a finite period of time, which means that system, i.e. the state and the community, have now taken it upon themselves to continue it. So scale and sustainability are, for me, the 2 vital cogs to do any sort of transformation in the social sector.
But aren't you leaving the job unfinished if you aren't sort of going into depth? If you're finishing all the 7 courses, you're just doing 1 or 2 and moving on, is there a risk the system may fall back to where it was and all the work that you did might also sort of dissipate?
Well, so there again, I would not do one intervention. So because after so many years now, we've come to the conclusion that a single intervention does not create transformation. A complete model does, right? So in our case, for example, over the last 7, 8 years now, we've been focusing on math for 1st to 5th grade, right? And we have a very comprehensive model, and we can chat about that. Your argument will be, why only math? What about languages? What about science? What about this? What about that, right? But I'm saying, if I can put this model out in public domain, and if you remove math as the content from it, and somebody else who's good at science or some other subject is able to put their content, the model would still work. So I will set out to perfect it with one domain of content, right? But I will make the model available to everybody else so that others can populate it with theirs. It goes also for me to say that Akshara alone can't do everything at scale. You need many more people to be able to do that.
Why is scale important? I mean, supposing Akshara were to do it in one particular state or couple of states and does a stellar job, that's still 10 million children that you're impacting.
Yeah, so look at it this way, right? Let's first understand what is the scale we are talking about. When we started our math program, we looked at just children in 4th and 5th grade across the country, and that number came to 52 million. This is general data that's available, right? That's 4th and 5th grade, right? Now, if you look at, if you survey where the worldwide development dollars are going, the names of Ghana, Kenya, South Africa come up very frequently, and you know that as much as I do, right? They have populations of 30 million, 45 million, 52 million.
The student population or total population?
Total population.
Right. So the student population is
far less, right? So the 4th and 5th grade population in our country is equal to or much more than, what they have
combined Yeah.
as a total population.
Right.
So that gives you a sense of the magnitude of what we have. Let's not forget also that operating scenarios are different given the vastness of our country, the cultural issues and a whole bunch of other things. Lots of things are different. So if you are to hit and target 150 to 200 million children, which is what a solution should do, then you just automatically see what it means, right? It's a huge thing. And if your solution is not geared from the beginning to address scale, you will just fail. When you scale up, and in our country, scaling up essentially means that you have to work with government, right? When you work with government, you don't control government. So the dynamics completely changes. So if your solution works for pilot, is no guarantee it will work at scale. However, if you've designed it from the beginning to say that eventually its home is in society, i.e. state and community, right? And therefore I will design it for that eventuality, then you have a fantastic chance of making it happen.
But can there be any one solution for 150 to 200 million children?
No, but there can be one common pool of tricks that can be adapted to different parts of the country.
So can you give me an example? I mean, what is it something?
Well, so, example is very simple, right? So we have so many languages. State to state is a different language, right? So if you develop something that's math is language agnostic, so you'd say not a big deal, right? But teachers' handbooks, training material, all that stuff has to be in the local languages, but the content is the same. But if I go to Gujarat, I'll have to translate all of that into Gujarati. If I'm in Karnataka, I got to do it in Kannada and Urdu. If I'm in Tamil Nadu, I'll have to do it in Tamil, and so on and so forth, right? So there will always be local flavors. But content-wise, it's the same.
Ashok, can you tell us a little bit more about GKA, Ganitha, Kalika, Andholana?
Okay, so the key word for me in that Ganith, Kalika, Andholana is not Ganith, it's actually Andholan. And Andholan is, we all know, is basically means a movement, which means that it was designed to engage everybody.
Right.
Only when you have everybody involved in it does it become a movement, right? So we said, what's the best candidate for an Andholan, right? Food has been taken over by Akshay Patra, right? And there are so many, and literacy is not an easy candidate, not because it can't fit into a model, but because you will need 100 different things depending on the state. I mean, languages are different. So what is agnostic and therefore somewhat universal in our country? And that was math. Also, math had the dubious distinction of most people hating math, including many teachers that we've met.
Including being scared, right? There are a lot of students who are scared of math as well.
Yeah. So there's this huge phobia for math that somehow it's that unless you are born with the math gene, you will not be successful, kind of thing, right? So how do you dispel this myth of the math gene, right? So for us, therefore, we said, let's focus on that and let's find out why is it that people, can't do math well. And the numbers in this country. If you take any ASR survey from 2005 to 2018, the number hovers around 20% of children in grade 5 can do division, right? Give or take 1, 2, 3% up and down, and you are educational initiatives, so you will almost call it measurement error, right? But not a whole lot has changed over time. So if you can dramatically improve that, what does it take to make that happen, right? Textbooks were one answer, but that, and I know that it's not a trivial exercise to get textbooks modified.
A lot of
stakeholders, the process is too long and all that. So, we asked teachers, what would it take for you to deliver quality math instruction in the classroom, right? And, there's a lot of decoding, but what we came to understand is that teachers are saying, I have a textbook, I am expected to deliver to that textbook, but I don't have the tools to help me do that. And for us, that was a sign that prepare a kit. And also what we realized was we have to educate teachers on a pedagogy to teach math. Math is not memorizing and reciting. Math takes you from the concrete to the abstract. So the kit, therefore, had to be things that were concrete, which would eventually lead into the abstraction of math, right? And that entire CRA process, as they call it, is itself a fair bit of education for the teacher. It's not that all teachers get it, but I think a reasonably large number do manage it. But the beauty is that once you have the kit, children are engaged in learning math, right? So the kit came about. And then the teacher said, this is beautiful, the kit is nice, kids love it, I like it, everything is good. We need some training, right? So we had to create a training process. Now, imagine if you were doing a pilot for 200 teachers, this would be easy to train.
Right.
But you take any state like Karnataka, 44,000 schools, you have to train at least 50,000 teachers. You have to figure out right from the beginning how you're going to address that process of training 50,000 teachers. So in our book, we said, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of a district having many blocks and a block having many clusters. So we said at a cluster level, can we train directly 2 people who in turn will train the other 10, 12? So you got the textbook, you got the training,
Yes.
right? And the rest of it is process now. What is the process? You are in 10,000 schools. You are a small NGO like Akshara, right? You don't have 10,000 people. So how do you know that the program is working, right? So you have to create use of appropriate technology in this case that can help you. And what better than using a cell phone, right? So we created an Android app, an app that essentially allows even you to download it on your phone, and when you walk into a school, you know what school that is, and you observe the math class and answer 4 simple questions. Each of those questions is actionable. I could have put 25 questions, but that would have defeated the purpose, because everyone would then resort to writing it at home. That's not the whole purpose, right? So we said 4 simple questions. When you were in the math class, was math actually happening? Yes or no? If the math was happening, was the teacher trained or no? Because I could have trained you, but then you get transferred and somebody else comes. So if there's a critical mass of teachers who are not trained, it's a sign for us to do something about it. So the actionable. Third is, was the teacher using the kit? Because there's a kit.
Yes.
Lots of people have the tendency to say, I've been teaching for 20 years, I know what I'm doing. And therefore, the kit has got a safe place up, in the cupboard.
Can you describe this kit for a minute? Like, what does it have? And
Yeah, so the kit is very interesting. It's very colorful. It teaches all concepts that are required for 1st to 5th grade math. So it goes from place value, all the operations, shapes, measurements, all these things. And there's an activity for each one of them. So interestingly, part of it is a weighing scale, right? So children actually weigh stuff. There's a tailor's measuring tape. To teach 4 operations, we have a string of beads. You have a place value mat. You have an abacus. You have play money. So it's using group, learning. So the ideal way of doing this is to have small groups of 4s and 5s. Same problem, 747 plus 423, but this group solves with play money, this group solves with an abacus, this group. So the same concept can be taught with multiple manipulatives. The kit was, is it in use or not in use, is a question. And finally, was group learning actually being practiced? Because that's a core of our thing. And people send these messages, and this gets updated on our system every night. And every 2-3 weeks, we send aggregate reports at some level, in the geography, for them to say these parts are not doing so well, so can you give it a push? So because of that, let's say over a 2-year period, kit usage went from approximately 30% at the beginning to almost 90% now.
Wow, that's a fabulous jump.
That's a fabulous jump, right? Group learning also had not quite 90%, but in the 70%. And all this data is available in public domain. I mean, you can just log on to and say GK dashboard, and you'll see all of this. So the use of technology in this manner is kind of helping the cause, to take it further and further, right? So the last bit, so we came across and said, let's do it in a different way. And the different way is actually for us killing 2 birds with 1 stone. We wanted community engagement, and we wanted to assess children, right? So we said, how do we convince Gram Panchayats to host a Gram Panchayat level contest for children? This whole process is managed by local volunteers. Each one of those volunteers is expected to give us 2 hours a month. And they are all local, and most likely they've been to the same schools. So they have a vested interest there. So around the examination arena, which is like a shamiana, parents are sitting, we are there, and if you are visiting with me, you will also be there. First 60 minutes, children do a paper and pencil test. The second 60 minutes, the volunteers correct the papers, because with the help of an answer key that we've provided. The third 60 minutes is spent in announcing prizes and giving the community that's assembled a good idea as to what the learning levels are.
So all of this is happening in a very transparent manner.
Absolutely transparent. Everybody is seeing it.
Yeah. Grading, everything is very public.
Absolutely public. The 4th hour is usually the most fascinating, because everyone's agitated
on why the
learning levels are so low. And for a brief while, you'll see a lot of blame floating around. But very soon, it converges to saying, okay, we know what the situation is, now what do we do? Right? Which is the conversation you really want to have.
Yes.
Right? So that's how it converges eventually. And this has been almost magical for us, because last year in 12 districts in Karnataka, we did almost 1,300 such contests.
Wow.
And tested probably close to 200,000 children. This was completely paid for by the community.
That's a sign of ownership, no? Because in the community.
I used the word sustainability at the beginning of this conversation.
Right.
For us, this is it, right? When the local community starts to actually invest in this, it's a sign that you're on the right track, right? So, 1 stone for assessment and the same stone for sustainability and community engagement.
Right.
So now you see, we now have a model coming up, right? So you have a model with pedagogy and teaching learning material, training, monitoring, assessment, community engagement. All this doesn't happen without government buy-in for you to operate at that scale. So these 6 pillars are vital. And there's a 7th pillar. The 7th pillar is a child gets 2 hours instruction per week in math in the school. Not enough, because no learning environment at home.
Right.
So supposing I were to make available the entire math curriculum on the family smartphone as games, would that work?
Because nowadays most people have smartphones, they have data plans and...
Yeah. And our solution now is, which is called Building Blocks, downloadable from Google Play Store, mapped to NCF 2005, 1st to 5th grade math. okay, available currently in 5 languages, works offline, online, is free. What more do you want?
So Ashok, what I heard is, essentially if there is an intervention in a small pilot setting, then there are too many things that are controlled that might make it successful, but when then it's sort of done at a larger scale, it may not still have the same fidelity. And beyond an intervention, when you think about it as a model where you have talked about how there's pedagogy, there's community involvement, there's some form of testing, there's some form of public acceptance, some form of a public show, and celebrating children who are doing well, and bringing to light what the real data is. That model then is applicable to other types of interventions as well, whether one is thinking about science, whether one is thinking about...
Not intervention, other domains.
Other domains,
yeah.
Right,
yeah.
right. So why, is this the first of its kind? Are there others that you have seen that you respect, whether it be in India or abroad?
Well, I honestly don't believe I've seen anything that's a complete model like this. And for us, it's taken a while to actually converge to a model and articulate it. It's easy to turn around and say, oh, let's give them a kit and the training and it should work. Right? And then, yes, to a large extent it will work, but will it sustain? Will it scale? Right? Yeah, it will scale if you get government involved. Sure. But will it sustain? Why should it sustain, Then you got to say you got to bring in the community, right? Then you say, excuse me, there's so much technology available that's inexpensive. Can we utilize it? Can you leverage it, right? So now we are looking at more, cutting edge things. Like for example, if I were to do, let's say this year, 3,000 gram panchayat contests, and I'll have approximately 160 to 170 children per contest. So that's 500,000 kids. Right. Each of them is answering 20 questions. So suddenly I've got 10 million answers. Now, can we apply cutting edge deep learning stuff to figure out what are the pitfalls for children in subtraction? Right? To just think of something randomly, you can get different levels of insights that can help us, alert teachers ahead of time, saying when you're doing this, worry about these issues. So you're telling them ahead of time. So technology, I think, has to be like a backbone, need not be prominent, but it should be there to help you. Another way for us that's important, and we are all familiar with Diksha and the Energize textbook, right? When I talk to you about the Gram Panchayat contest, so our job does not get over at the end of that contest. We actually give the Gram Panchayat a detailed report. Think of it as a ASAR report for math for that GP, right? It's a school by school thing. And for each school, we have, the 20 questions and what percentage did this, what are the weakest areas in that school, and with a recommendation that a teacher for this school should be told that if she scans this QR code here, it will take you to the Diksha platform where the video prepared by Akshara on how to teach subtraction using the Akshara kit is available. So she can do a refresher and use that. So the 2, 3, 4 weakest areas are QR coded there. So each school actually now gets a report with QR codes for the teacher. So there's a definite ask we have of a teacher now.
You're also closing the loop.
And it's closing the loop, yeah.
You're basically having a particular, let's say, kit that is being made available to supplement all the interventions that are happening. With the use of these monthly tests done in a public setting.
It's not monthly, it's once a year.
Once a year.
That's it.
Yeah. So with the use of these annual tests, it is telling teachers what are the skills that children are doing relatively well off and what are the things that they need support. Yeah. Now, rather than sort of blaming the teacher, you're guiding the teacher
how to do it better. And I'll tell you what happens, right? You do one of these GP contests in September. And let's say the schools haven't performed well. We've had many cases of teachers coming to us and saying, this is good, I know my children didn't do well. We will repeat the test by February and I will show you how they have improved.
And so has this model been copied by others?
So we started in Karnataka.
Yeah.
So 12 districts are complete. We now this year starting in the rest of the district. So this year, if you look at it by the end of this academic year, we will be in every single school in Karnataka.
Wow, that's massive.
That's scale. We moved to Odisha a couple of years ago, started with 2 districts, and this year they are adding 20 more districts. Last year in December 2018, Andhra Pradesh started a pilot with 2,000 model schools, and this year they are adding 4,000 schools. Now, you look at the scale now, right? I'm not talking 2,000 children, I'm saying 2,000 schools.
Right.
So you have 44, these are all schools. So we are now talking the ability to impact, millions of children.
But is there a risk when you have scaled so fast that there has been, some kind of dilution to the quality of the work you do?
There will be. You have to take a calibrated risk there and saying, are we going to wait? Or because if there is no sense of urgency, and I believe we should have a sense of urgency because every year we delay, we are losing 100 million child years.
But a sense of urgency at the risk of quality?
Well, so you may not get 100%, you will get 50% right.
And so 50% good enough?
Start with that. I mean, where you're getting 0, you're getting 50. Right?
Well, it's not 0, right? I mean, there's some stuff that's happening. There are
okay, it's 22. Asar says 22, right? So let's say I did, 50% of the schools have gone to 35. Right? It's still better than being at 22 across. Right? So we just want, but you're right in a sense that the processes and the tools we've developed are not easy for government to absorb instantly. Right? But in the first year, 50% will do it. In the second, third years, another 20, 25% will do it. There's always going to be a residual 15, 20% that will never do it. We have to be prepared for that.
And is this displacing something because you've introduced this? Is something else now not happening because of this and time and attention is going to this?
So, Ganitha Kalika Andholana is the math period. It is not remedial. Nobody need to come an hour before or stay back an hour. Doesn't replace any other period. It is the math period.
So it fits within the school timetable,
everything.
Hours,
Math
system, people. Yeah.
They don't call it GK, but it's called the math period, but it's GK.
Right. Ashok, this seems like Disneyland. It seems like everything is going great. I mean, is there something that we're missing?
Listen, we are on an interview, so I have to tell you nice things, right? No, but it's not easy to start. First of all, it's not easy to implement it like this. I mean, it takes a lot of dedication. We've been fortunate at Akshara. We have a great team that, all of our people on the ground are people who live in the communities they serve. So they have tremendous attachment to their Janma Bhumi, right? That they want to give back and so on, right? I think when you scale, the biggest challenges that we see are in the form of resources. Whether it be human resources or financial, right? Because the numbers you seek are significantly large. So even though GKA is like 75 rupee per child per year, if you're talking 1 million kids, that's 7.5 crores. And that's one state. So if you're in 4 states, you suddenly need 30 crores. And 30 crores of, resources, not easy to come by. I mean, especially, and I missed this portion, I think, when I said government buying, because we make sure that the governments invest in this program by buying the kits through their own process, again sustainability. So they will tender for it, they will have their procurement process, and they pay for the whole thing. And kits are a large chunk of the cost.
And have you considered the government paying for your services as well?
No, we've never done that. And I
why
think
is
the considered wisdom is, it's not a good idea.
If you can expand on that a bit more.
Because I think the minute this kind of money is involved, governments also can't just take and write you a check of 15 crores. They have to go through the justification process as to why you. Anything above a crore, I think, is tendered. Right? So, if Akshara is asking for 10 crores, you can't just give it away.
But why not write an RFP, write out the specs of what you're doing, actually do a tender, and you compete on that. Given the fact that you've done this for a long time, you would easily get the highest technical marks.
Possibility exists, but you also have to balance it with saying that what do you and I owe back to the process, right? Government is paying for something, the community is paying for something. There's something called the rest of society that also has a part of stake in that whole thing. If you're thinking of it nationally. If you're thinking of it at a very local level, pointless. But if you're thinking nationally, you need this. And interestingly, the guys closest to the problem are also closest to the solution, but they are the farthest away from power and resources. Right? So how do you, bring that together?
Thank you so much, Ashok. I really, enjoyed our conversation today, where we talked about what exactly should one use as a design principle when one is starting out in thinking of a new way of doing things. How should scale be an important consideration in that? I loved the story about how the community got involved in Ganitha, Kalika, Andholana and almost embraced it as their own. It spurred conversation, it spurred innovation, it brought to light what learning levels truly mean and what teachers can then do, what resources they have access to help improve that situation and take ownership of that. Really enjoyed your personal story of finding ways to repay the debt of education by helping others sort of do much better. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much, Pratham.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Yeah.
Thanks.